2017. Congratulations to all teams for making it this far. So house rules apply. Don't make too much noise. Leave the room only between speeches. But allow allowance for applause for the teams. Like in OG we have Mara L, OO Mara C, CG You Decide Law, and CO Mara A. Without further ado, I hereby invite the Prime Minister to start the debate on the motion. This House believes that the feminist movement should prioritize critiquing social structures and attitudes over shaming individual perpetrators. Hear, hear. Single chair.
In an industry where women are disproportionately discriminated, not getting equal pay, sexist attitudes being thrown at them, having to go through sexual assault, in an environment where men control the power, where men are the most powerful directors in that particular industry. The question of today's debate is whether the feminist movement should position itself within a broad, inclusive message that people can buy into to critique social structures without feeling personally defensive or use to the method of personalized witch hunts that divides and alienates people under that society. So what are we going to do with this problem? Number one, we will prioritize critiquing social structures rather than critiquing like the particular person involved in it, right? So what are the circumstances in which this occurs, right? So things such as we will critique general norms of men having higher wages, or general norms such as men being powerful directors or having lead roles within the particular industry, and things such as like how men are usually involved in sexual assault with women. But obviously within all these scenarios we will have to pinpoint examples and so on and so forth. But what differentiates us within their world is at least we are prioritizing the structures that exist in this particular scenarios instead of just pointing out at one particular individual and saying this is what you're doing and we do not agree with this, so we will witch hunt you and just like guilt trip you into like agreeing with our problem, right? So what does this happen in society if we would to do this, right? So critiquing social norms and attitudes creates more buy-in in the form of society, while shaming individuals' personality alienates this whole conversation. Sit down. So let's talk about why does shaming alienate in the first place, right? We believe that all people in the industry, famous people particularly, right, are loved by their fans, right? So how like Kevin Spacey has like worked for decades and sit down and has been working in the entertainment industry and loved by millions of people, and he was like put on a pedestal by these particular individuals, right? So people had fond memories of him, and like having him on like that particular place where he was jovial in his like character, where he was loving his character. So people look up to this individuals as role models, right? But the unfortunate reality that exists in both worlds that we have to face is we don't like that they are put in this kind of pedestal, but the reality is that they are, right? So this means that he has so much social power within his like influence, right? So the converse that happens on our world, where we have feminist movement like advocating their rights, we believe that there is not like the social attitudes towards feminist movement is not the same as it is towards the celebrities, right? So feminist movement always had to explain why they're doing, always had to explain why they're not man-hating clubs or whatever it is. And society is naturally like adverse to being persuaded to this, because it is now when they are like saying all these things is seen as a personal attack to a particular individual, right? So this is even more to when sexual assault claims are hard to prove, because number one, perhaps it happens like years ago, and perhaps it was not even reported to the police. So when people come out and pinpoint to these particular individuals, you're unable to even like make their case, i.e. Fox is unable to fire this particular individual because there was no report to begin with, right? So the converse is in our world, at least if we advocate social structures that exist within a society, it's easier for us to have buy into that particular narrative. So what is the conclusion coming from what I'm saying? Before that, I'm not going to take any more yet, right? So the conclusion at which what I was saying just now is, what would society generally feel about these particular things, right? So instead, so what we see now is like people are just like not unable to rationalize and just like be apologists for celebrity behavior, right? So people are just prone to doing it because they are seen that these people, that these individuals are like loved and so on and so forth, even like have done or contributed a lot to the particular society, right? So by doing this example, like how Donald Trump came forward and like talked about I'm not going to say it, but something very discriminative towards women, and people just ignore that fact just because he's like put on a pedestal in America and all that stuff, right? So they forget the act that he does just because he's doing it as a celebrity and so on and so forth. So they forget to acknowledge that feminist movement struggles are there, but just prioritize the individuals, which we believe is a harm in itself. Before that, closing.
Hollywood oftentimes has this a veil of idolization that your everyday person already thinks is isolated in La La Land, like critics over Hugh Hefner. How will people be able to focus on this issue seriously without star status and ideals of Hollywood conflating those views?
The thing is, when you pinpoint a particular individual, you just ignore the fact that it is within a bigger picture, which is the feminist movement in itself. Because pinpointing a particular individual would just like make all their fans or all their like loved ones just be defensive towards that intellectual conversation in itself. We believe that is the problem within today's debate, right? So the thing that so like even if people start to lose their jobs, like in these particular scenarios where they were sexual assault or anything, the important thing is to make sure that they lost it not because of result of a witch hunt that they are particularly doing, right? But it is the result of individuals like actively engaging in a conversation and actively saying how that particular act disrupts like the feminist movement within itself, right? So because of how we are able to like perhaps slowly try to change the attitudes about these struggles, then it is easier for people to buy into that narrative and to buy into that organic change and not be defensive in the end of the day because their celebrities is being attacked. Before opening.
You've been saying a lot of things, like just asserting, but not telling us how exactly this happens. You need to prove some types of analysis and how exactly people might listen and care about what
I think you should have just listened to my 6 minutes of speech, Azim. So we don't have. So I like on our side at least, these people will not feel attacked. Will not be acting defensive when like a particular society attacks them. Right? At least on our side, they will be able to more openly like accept this particular critiques coming to them, because at the end of the day, what we want to change is like societal structures in a particular patriarchal society, right? We don't want to like just attack a person because of their personal attributes and so on and so forth, right? So conversely, this happens in their world where these people perhaps when they are just fired by their directors per se, then we would just forget about what's ever happening in the world, which we do not want to even cater to begin with, right? So what have I told you in my speech? I've told you why it is more strategic for the feminist movements themselves to critique social structures instead of going on a witch hunt and pinpoint to this particular individuals, because in the end of the day, we believe that by doing this, they are able to engage in more intellectual conversations, and I've never been prouder to vote.
Alright, I thank the Prime Minister and welcome Leader of Opposition. Here.
When it comes to the feminist movement, it is important for us to carefully plan our strategy in order for our message, for our views to be accepted. Because unfortunately, the feminist movement is often rejected, deemed to have views to the rest, opposing to the views of the rest of the world, and this is time for us to change this. Side opening opposition would say that we believe that a strategic move for us to make is for us to shame these individual perpetrators, such as Harvey Weinstein and also Kevin Spacey, for various reasons that I'll be telling you later on. But before going on to my key substantives, let's just deal with what Prime Minister said to you today. They say that via attacking more on like social structures and attitudes of people in Hollywood per se. This will make it even more inclusive because they don't want to make it divisive. They don't want to make it into a witch hunt. Look, the angle that you are taking is completely too broad. Plus, this is something that critiquing social structures is something that the feminist movement do on a daily basis anyways. And we don't see the kind of trends when it comes to like fast changes, especially when it comes to this context right now, which is in Hollywood per se, right? We have this kind of discourse like on social media, on every kind of platforms, every single day. And what do we see? We get meninists, we get groups such as them steering away the discourse because they feel attacked, because they see themselves in the kind of social structures that you so try to attack on a daily basis. It's so difficult for us to change these social structures, and you need to tell us how suddenly now this will suddenly work and suddenly people will start to listen. Second, they say that these people have fans and fans love them, they get defensive. Look, the minute these men got exposed, their fans completely dumped them. People who even tried to defend them would get attacked on social media. Like the minute that the news of Spacey got out, Spacey just lost his job. They completely put a stop to the production of House of Cards. This shows that irregardless of people's views and stance on feminism per se, the controversy that surrounds it is enough to create a result as compared to under your side where you don't get particularly like actual results at the end of the day. Let's go on into my key substantives. Number one, what happens when you attack social norms and social structures? When the discourse is focused on this, it often attacks the parts of culture. It often attacks the worldview of people on the ground per se. That they see parts of themselves being attacked directly by a movement that everyone seems to have a lot of fun making fun of, right? The feminist movement's discourse is often deemed as childish. They say that the movement makes bad and also like unrealistic claims, right? It's very easy for you to just demonize the movement as a whole. We must claim our legitimacy by actually doing this. So when people feel attacked, what do? Number one, they get really, really defensive, guys. And when they get defensive, they would just reject and shut down and not exactly go on into the discourse even more. Because they see this kinds of movement, because they see how trendy it is for you to just simply demonize these movements, and it's much more easier for them to not exactly listen to them, right? It feels like the movement is trying to out to get them, and this is what happens on a daily basis. That's why this kind of discourse don't exactly particularly be successful when it comes to platforms such as social media. Why is this important? Look, people need to get the message across, because if they don't, if they shut down the minute you try to reach out to them, this is when you fail. This is when the feminist movement doesn't get the kind of results that they want at the end of the day. So what's the common ground? Which aspect do we need to talk about? Which aspect do we need to harp on? Only then will we go on into like the discourse of social norms. Look, by naming and shaming sexual perpetrators, we share the kind of common ground with the majority, right? When we point out actions that are objectively bad, it is difficult for the public, it is difficult for fence-sitters to defend these particular actions. It is difficult for them to head the discourse in the kind of direction that we don't want. But before going on to that, yes?
Individual victims are already going to pose lawsuits or file criminal charges or call out individual actors and actresses anyway. What marginal benefit is there in the feminist movement limiting its criticism to individuals rather than Hollywood as a whole?
I'll be explaining even more in this particular argument per se on regarding to that, right? So when you point out these particular actions, it's difficult for the meninists to defend these particular actions, because even if they do, even people on the fence would actually rationalize the kind of things that they would say, right? They would say, look, these people have already committed a crime. The fact that those lawsuits and actual legal actions are being taken against them is kind of proof that this is something that is inherently bad, that even the state decides is something bad. And they would even reflect on themselves and say, the kind of argument oh, I wouldn't want it if my sisters get such treatment from men. It feels weird if I'm defending Kevin Spacey now because of how the list of things that he's been doing to boys. I don't want this to happen anyways. So these are the kind of common grounds in which people don't exactly get, in which people we can get fence-sitters to even agree with us, and this is important, right? Because these are the kind of common grounds where people who don't exactly support feminism yet can agree on. And it's strategic for us to make sure that they understand this particular basis first, and only then can we steer the discourse towards the social structures, towards changing attitudes, right? Once we name and shame these particular people. Because once we dissect the kind of problematic aspects of these individuals per se, that they wouldn't feel so attacked. I'm not taking any more sit down. Is when they don't feel any more attacked fact that says when they see the kind of evil characters in these particular individuals, it's much more easier for them to collectivize and think about, all right, this is something bad and maybe something that I need to go on into further on for us to see as to how exactly is this being caused, right? And look, under our sites, these are the kind of things that are more controversial. It's much more easier for us to pinpoint exact cases, and it's much more easier for us to gain media attention, right? Media attention will harp on this. It is easier for them to cover the stories because when it is exactly written about certain individuals, and it's much more easier for the discourse to be flagged on social media, like everybody knows this thing. And once we get the kind of attention, it is much easier for us to steer the kind of attention that they get from these people. Once these people agree that it's bad, and only then can we start steering them into the kind of discourse that side OG would want. Because if side OG just straight up goes into the kind of discourse, people wouldn't even want to listen at the end of the day. That once we get this much media attention, it's much easier for us to talk about the social structures that people are so defensive about. That once we get them to agree on a fundamental basis as to what exactly is bad, but now we only then will we see and we deal with the cause of that. This is how we get people to believe in us. This is how we get people to see, I guess the feminist movement is trying to make sense nowadays. I guess they're not exactly just rambling on some things that I don't exactly understand, right? It's much more easier for them to relate to these sort of things when these things are inherently bad. And that is why exactly we think that this is the most strategic move for the feminist movement to do. That this, at this point in time, this opportunity has arisen, and though unfortunate to the victims, but this is something that the feminist movement can help them with. That the feminist movement can use these particular things in order for us to establish our message even more. Never be prouder to oppose.
Right, I thank the Leader of Opposition and welcome the Deputy Prime Minister. Here.
The case of the opening opposition is contingent upon the feminist movement being able to strip away the social capital of the most powerful people in an industry dominated by men, and also the ability for proving that celebrity perpetrators will not utilize their social capital in order to manipulate public perception in their favor, for example, and also contingent upon them after Asila spends 2 minutes agreeing that apparently people are incredibly defensive when you critique people that they truly love, people that they truly support, and people that they've placed their hopes, dreams, as well as role model their life around. Apparently they will now change their mind about that after you've told them that they are wrong, they're also sexist for supporting a sexist, they're also a sympathizer towards a sexual assaulter on their side of the house. Because, ladies and gentlemen, after Sila's very thorough analysis and agreeing with us, ladies and gentlemen, we think that we don't see any likelihood of individuals now suddenly changing their mind in this particular scenario. That's why, at this point in the debate, we understand that critiquing social structures may be inaccessible on some level. Maybe, ladies and gentlemen, maybe things that people don't understand. But these are all mitigatable harms. Like, for example, prioritizing in this debate means that we can still point out to individual examples. We can still point out how, when, and these things occur, ladies and gentlemen. Or we can make it more relatable by explaining in language that is accessible. Like, for example, the He for She campaign is explained in a way that makes it accessible for men while not alienating men, for example. Like, very simple messaging, like, for example, saying that for every $1 that a man makes, 75 cents a woman makes, for example. A very easy, communicatable messaging and narratives that people can buy into every single day, ladies and gentlemen. Those things are mitigatable. However, one thing that they haven't mitigated under their sub-house is how do people stop being defensive? How do they strip away the social capital? How do you gain more influence in a world where the feminist movement is already seen as feminazis, witch hunts, and things like that? That's the analysis that hasn't been provided on that sub-house. Notice that in Sila's speech, the point where they say people stop being defensive in the latter half of her speech is, if we can make people less if we can successfully strip away their social capital, if we can convince people of the clearness of the harm, if we can prove to them that this thing is so clearly and obviously bad, then we will make people feel less defensive. The point in this debate is whether you can prove those things to begin with or not. What did Sharifah told you? Sharifah told you that we're talking about not the sexual assault cases that happened 5, 10, 15 years ago, where the facts are unclear. Victims never made a report, ladies and gentlemen, and fundamentally people don't believe are the victim, or people don't know what happened in that particular scenario. How are you going to be able, on opening opposition, be able to prove to millions of people on your side of the house that some X happened, that someone is truly actually wrong, that perpetrator actually did the crime, without supporters being able to have plausible deniability? Then no, no, the victim never reported. That surely means that the person is innocent. No, there was no facts of the case, no evidence, no DNA. All these things occur, ladies and gentlemen. Those are the realities that the feminist movement are constrained by. But if you're going to make an argument premised upon the individual cases, then you're bogged down by the individual facts that you don't know on their side of the house, ladies and gentlemen. That's why it's a risk bogging down your political argument, ladies and gentlemen, that can be far more potent when it comes to broad-based support, broad-based argumentation, without attaching the credibility of your argument to an individual case where most people will not be able to know the full facts of the case. Most of the time, it's very easy to disprove those individual cases and becomes exceptionally risky to pin the credibility on that one particular case. Done with the refutational material. What's up?
How exactly are we able to access media attention knowing that this is an unintuitive thing to the conservative society?
Okay, here I'm gonna go out to our alternative material, and plus I'm surprised that Azim didn't catch on to some of Sharifa's material already when Sharifa told you about how, number one, you make people significantly less defensive in buying into this material, and secondly, considering if we believe opening opposition material of trend analysis, ladies and gentlemen, then surely that trend still exists under our side, just that we don't make people defensive and resistant to those trends anyway. Now, how do you get the support under our side, ladies and gentlemen? 3 levels of analysis about how you co-opt other celebrity support and society support. First, we think that oftentimes you have individuals that celebrities that are allies to your cause, whether it be the Claire Underwood, I don't know what her name was, or other celebrities that are feminists, other celebrities that are actual supporters of our values, ladies and gentlemen. Kevin Spacey isn't the only celebrity in the status quo. But the important thing about how to get these celebrities on board with your movement to popularize and get media attention and all the things that they want under their side of the house, not mutually exclusive, is to make sure that they're not afraid of joining your movement. Why would they be afraid? They will be afraid, for example, for one, getting into a personal spat with powerful people in the industry. Being personally afraid. It's an unfortunate reality, right? That celebrities, even the most powerful ones, are afraid that they might get their next job, won't get their next billion-dollar industry, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, you can hear all you want, Azim, but how do you change that fundamentally? That fundamentally, these individuals have to be able to be comfortable that when they support the feminist movement, they don't feel like they are getting into a personal fight with Jerry Bruckheimer, Steven Spielberg, and finally ruin their careers if they are wrong, for example, ladies and gentlemen. But the second thing is that they need to know that the thing that they're supporting, or the social movement that they're supporting, isn't premised upon something that could potentially be risky and be wrong, for example. Like I said just now, the facts of the case are unclear a lot of the time. Oftentimes it's difficult to point out whether an individual victim was actually wrong. We don't know whether this person is frivolously claiming upon a celebrity in order to get money and sue them, for example. A celebrity is going to be far more likely to be afraid of signing on to movement if it has to attach itself to an individual case that it doesn't even know whether or not it's true or not, ladies and gentlemen. People are more unlikely to sign up on their side, more likely to sign up on our side. But thirdly, ladies and gentlemen, we are far more unlikely to have allies or other celebrities sign on to the movement at the point at which, ladies and gentlemen, you're conflating supporting a broad-based political movement while conflating with the close ties and personal relationships with celebrities all around. Hollywood is a super small place, ladies and gentlemen. That oftentimes the most famous A-list people have close and personal relationships with one another. How likely do you think it is that the allies and other celebrities that can get the media attention, that can critique social structures, that can garner attention, like for example, Emma Watson being able to point out to broad-based political structures all across the world and gaining massive popularity, how likely are these celebrities going to come out when they feel like, I don't know, I feel like this guy didn't actually do it because I've known him for a very long time, or I have a close and personal relationship, he's my brother-in-law, or who knows, ladies and gentlemen, that they're just friends, and admitting that those people are sexual assaulters or sexist means admitting to yourself that you're associating with a sexual assaulter at the end of the day. That's the fundamental barrier that you have from getting broad-based allyship in Hollywood on your side of the house. We can still have media attention, we can still have all the things that you want, unless you want to prove to me that the entirety of Hollywood isn't able to get any media attention, literally as in that would be ridiculous. That at this point in the debate, what you have is you need to have allyship. You can't make people defensive, and the only way you can do that either by society or other allies in the region is by making sure they can subscribe to broad-based political support while not getting bogged down to facts uncertain, personal relationships, or making people feel like they're defensive of their personal nature. And that's why we give you a pathway forward in resolving this debate. Thank you.
Right, I thank the Deputy Prime Minister. Welcome the Deputy Leader of Opposition. Here.
put yourself in the shoes of a conservative male person in Hollywood or America or anywhere in the world. When a feminist movement, one that you decried as being weird, unrealistic, unintuitive, and brings in unwanted leftist values, tells you that your entire society, your entire worldview, and your entire collective identity is harmful, patriarchal, and attacking of women. Things of which you do not understand, things of which you cannot empathize because you do not see these things happen to you personally. This is the reality of the world that they would try to take down. And that is exactly why we tell you on Opening Opposition that you need to harp yourselves upon the things that are common ground, things that everyone agrees is objectively bad, and those are sexual predators. You tell them that this is something that is intrinsically harmful, and that's why then and only then do you link it to the stuff that opening government wants to talk about. It's not our burden to say that we will not prioritize it at all. We just need to find the right balance as to which when exactly do we want to enter and change the structural attitudes and change the structural norms. And the moment you do that is the moment when you tell people that this is intrinsically harmful, and then you tell them why is it intrinsically harmful and how are you more likely able to change that. So I'll tell you a few things. One, why exactly are we able to get the analysis that we want to talk about? Second, why you aren't able to change worldviews because people will be more defensive. Opening government can claim all they want. Third, and why exactly we are able to get the kind of celebrity allies, and why exactly we can get celebrities to attack these people, and why exactly the claims that they want to tell about these things being fake or these things being unproven is still unwrong. But before that, yes.
So what makes people more defensive? Saying Hollywood has a general problem that pays women less. Here are some stats and maybe some examples. Or here's a celebrity that you've loved for decades. You're sexist if you support a sexist, and we're going to go on a witch hunt on them. Which one makes some people more defensive?
The comparative is simple. If you tell people that Hollywood pays people less, you need to be able to prove that, considering that there are thousands of other forms of opposition research, operation collective surveys, and things that you don't even empathize or believe in the first place, as compared to us telling you that person who seems to be such a nice guy like Kevin Spacey is actually a sexual molester, is actually a pedophile who needs to be attacked. That therefore, you should recognize that these are horrible human beings. The difference is, you attacking one single person or few individuals don't attack your collective identity overall, as compared to you attacking an entire world or an entire worldview, and that's a comparative. No. So they told us few things. They told us that we can't ever get these sorts of things because sexual assault is hard to prove and people won't latch on to it. It's simple. The moment you get one sort of narrative, the moment Kevin actually something justified and clarified to people that he was sexually assaulted, numbers of other people often come out and tell the world that they were too assaulted by Kevin Spacey, they too were assaulted by Harvey Weinstein. That the number of victims rise in a crescendo, which makes these sorts of people more afraid to latch on to commit these acts, which means that more people will start to ask questions on why exactly are 10, 20 people claiming that they have been sexually assaulted, which means that we are able to get these things as comparative, as the comparative, which is that people can empathize over theirs. That people believe that this is intuitively bad as to theirs. Why exactly will celebrities latch on, and how exactly are we able to get our celebrity allies? It's simple, because the people who are being attacked, the people who are victims are celebrities themselves. People like Cara Delevingne, people like Gwyneth Paltrow often say that they were sexually molested, they feel sexually threatened and harmed by Harvey Weinstein. We are able to use the same narrative that you want, except that our narrative is much stronger. We are also able to use our Emma Stones. We are also able to use the sort of feminist movements that you want to talk about with the comparative us being able to hijack the media attention, us being able to hijack the conservative majoritarian narrative. With us being able to do that, the feminist movement is one that seems less offensive, less offensive and less aggressive as compared to the world on opening government. No. The reason being why exactly these celebrities won't sue. The reason why, one, most celebrities who are often not involved do not want to be seen in that situation. They don't want to feel that if I'm there, I too don't want to be assaulted. Second, celebrities who do not make any action can tend to be seen as sympathizers, and that gives them a greater incentives to join in and condemn these actions. Third, predators won't sue because they don't want their dirty laundry or any other potential attacks being shown the moment they have to sue and the moment they have to sue and prove all these things. Fourth, that most of the time these people admit their apology, and give out apologies, or just don't respond at all, which we can use and correlate to a point of guilt. Harvey Weinstein did not say that I'm not a special predator, that he did admit that he has a problem. Same thing with Kevin Spacey. So that's exactly how we're able to take down Mip's arguments. So how exactly will we change the narrative then? The moment you start agreeing to the idea of the feminist movement, you're able to show the attitude of the worldview, that which people often see as an attack of themselves. But the moment you prove to them that they're already members of your clan, of your in-group, of your male-dominated society, it's problematic that these people are often sexual predators who attack women sexually. You're able to say that your avatar in your celebrity is one that's substantially harmful. That these people often get attacks by the media, by the media, both progressive and conservative. The comparative here is that the media attention that opening government wants to talk about is one that is inherently leftist and progressive. They do not get the views on Fox. They do not get the views on CNN. The moment we are able to garner media attention by hijacking the cases of people like Harvey Weinstein or people like Kevin Spacey, we are able to make use of Fox. We are able to make use of CNN, reach a greater target audience. Why exactly will they listen and cater us then? Because they too want representation on their side. They too want to prove and tell people, look, even feminists agree this is a bad thing. That means that we are able to prove the ability for us to show to people who do not get this attention, to people who do not believe your argumentation on your side of the house. We are able to tell people who are often conservative that this is something that's objectively bad, and this is how we change it, and this is the structures that men often believe that they own a part of the women, that men believe that they often control everything. The comparative here is simple. We on opening opposition believes that in the worst case scenario, everyone agrees that sexual predation is a bad thing. On opening government, the majority rejects the entire worldview. The majority rejects the idea that women are being oppressed. The moment you are able to get people to latch on to our idea, and we slowly start to push the window of discussion, that is how we are able to prove for more discourse. That is how we are able to prove and maintain media relevancy. Proud Supos.
Alright, I thank the Deputy Leader of Opposition. Welcome the Member of Government to start the debate on closing up. Here.
We think it's incredibly simplistic for Azim to come out and say that when at the point of time where you shame one person, right, more and more women who have been assaulted in Hollywood by other people will come out and talk about it. We think that when you fuck over one guy who's already been caught, who's already in the eye of CNN, Fox News, everyone knows about it, the people who are coming out are the women who have been assaulted by the very same guy. And what happens to the women who have been assaulted by all the other guys that have not been caught? They are for reasons because of things such as their career, because of reasons such as they're not sure what happens if they come out and they are wrong. If they're not sure what happens, not they're wrong. If people just don't believe them, if people don't support them, if people don't lend their support, they know that it's the end of their career. These women are the women who are pushed even further out of this discourse, who are pushed even further into that without any beacon of support, without any form of any coming out and ever showing this. Though these women have been molested by other people, right, the only place they can come out, right, is when you have a more inclusive discussion, when you have a more inclusive discussion about the widespread problems in Hollywood, that they know that it's not just that one guy who's been doing it, like, you know that there are many more, there's an industry-wide problem, and there's a mechanism for them to come out because discourse is happening around all spectrums of Hollywood and all spectrums of sexual assault, because sexual assault does exist on a spectrum. So there are very serious cases of sexual assault where Harvey Weinstein has been doing it for years and years before he actually got caught, and there are of course like less serious sexual forms of sexual assault, perhaps on a drunken night someone like touched you in an inappropriate way. So these things are the things that get slipped off the radar, and these are the only things that can be talked about in our comparative on opening government. So what are closing government? What are we going to bring to you on closing government? We're going to bring to you, right, like to borrow CO's unique POI, right, on how like Hollywood is an isolated la la land, right. that change in Hollywood, right, can only come from within Hollywood itself. That the people who actually can bring about change are the people who aid, the people who abet these people like Harvey Weinstein, the people like Ben Affleck, the people like Matt Damon, who for years and years knew that Harvey Weinstein was committing sexual assault but did not speak out against it because they felt that because for their own personal reasons, because they were not held in the scrutiny of the media, they were not held, there was no discourse surrounding this industry-wide specific, that they were allowed to remain silent, they were allowed to not talk about it. So firstly, like let me illustrate to you the harms on what happens. Is whenever someone comes out and talks about Kevin Spacey, right, or talks about Harvey Weinstein, what happens is that, right, it's very, very easy, right, for the other men who are around him, his very close friends, like Ben Affleck, like Leonardo DiCaprio, to just jump off the bandwagon at the point of time he gets caught. Like it's easy to say, yeah, we did not know about this, that Harvey Weinstein did this. We are just going to jump off the bandwagon and just say that, hey, yeah, we are innocent. But in actual fact, right, these people who actually stood by and let these things happen for years on years are actually just as complicit as Harvey Weinstein is, in the fact that they allowed these things to happen. Because in Hollywood, right, what can happen? Like it's such an isolated like place, right, that when one person gets caught, what happens is just that they throw him off the bus, done. Everything moves on. Hollywood is exactly the same as it is. It continues on. There's no change. It continues on until the next big person gets caught. And that's another years and years. Many more women get actually sexually assaulted, and actually is worse, right? So only the directors, the star actors and actresses have the ability to bring about this change. Because in terms of things like when they decide who to co-star in a movie, when they decide what to say about these things, and only then when you have this widespread critique on this movement. And why would this widespread critique of this movement work, right? It's very important to understand, right, who we're talking about. We are talking about actors, right? We're talking about like people who have a huge public image, who rely really greatly on their public image in order for things such as box office returns, in order for marketing efforts, in order to figure out their own personal brand. These are people, right, like Ben Affleck, right? When there's a widespread industry like critique, when at press conferences women ask, what are you doing to help combat the sexual assault, right, the rise of sexual assault in Hollywood? Ben Affleck, although he's not a perpetrator, right, he is forced to engage in this discourse. He is forced to do this just to maintain his public image, the image that he is someone who stands up for feminist rights, the image that he is someone who we think it's very like simplistic for OO to say that that these actors are quick to demonize feminism and say that no, feminism is something that is start bashing feminism, right? We think that bashing comes from a select group of like people who are like comes from people who, that these actors are not going to jump onto this because for the very reason that the public image is so important to them, and that the public image, they know that they need women as a very strong ally in order for them to market the personal brand, in order for them for basic success in movies, right? We also, in the comparative, right, when you center discourse around a broad base of people, right, around a broad base of not just the perpetrators but the whole industry, people who aid and abet, we think, right, that when you force them to engage in discussion, when you force them to talk about these things, right, we think it's easier for women to come out. We think that they have no excuse to no longer talk about it. That they have no longer excuse to talk about it. They have no longer an excuse to keep silent about it. Because it's easy for you to keep silent about it when there's no discourse around you. When Ben Affleck was never asked in his press conference, what do you think about sexual assault allegations? He doesn't have a reason to come out and talk about Harvey Weinstein, what he knew Harvey Weinstein was doing. But at a point of time when Harvey Weinstein is already caught, he can say, oh, I did not know about it. But if he has been under constant questioning and stuff like that, right, at a point of time Harvey Weinstein is caught, he can no longer fall on that hypocrisy and say that, oh, I thought that I did not know anything, because in these things he was under scrutiny and he was being talked about. Yes, Azim.
Look, there's no urgency on your side for them to care about these things. But the moment we tell them that their friends are sexual predators, that's when we get them to jump on the bandwagon and move themselves and dissociate themselves from these people.
That is the point, right? We have to create this urgency, right? We have to create this urgency to show that it's an industry-wide problem. We have to create this urgency to say that it is happening on various spectrums. We have to make it easier for women to come out, women in Hollywood to come out, because they know it's industry-wide, rather than just one actor where they're not sure as to how to come out, they're not sure as to the risks associated with coming out. We have to make this a norm, like a norm for women to be able to speak out. We have to make this a norm for actors, male actors, to not be able to just be silent and not engage in any form of discourse. We have to do, change has to come from within, and we think that this is most important. Oh, one more thing I forgot,
Oh yeah, so when also in rebuttal to opening government's case, right? Like whenever you target just one person, right? It also gives rise easy for men to say, right? The things like not all men, like these things like not all men are doing this, not all men are doing are like Kevin Spacey, not all men are like Harvey Weinstein. But in our paradigm, right, it's not possible for people to say it like this when it becomes an industry-wide problem, when it's analogous to the real world, where a spectrum of like sexual assault does exist, where people actually realize that, hey, this is more analogous to the real world. That's when people cannot just fall back behind the like not all men thing. People cannot just disassociate themselves from the perpetrators and say that not all men are like that, the majority of men are not like that, but actually force themselves to look inside, look at the men and actually bring about proper change. That I'm very proud to propose.
Alright, I thank the government. Welcome the member of opposition. Here. Watch the kid.
Panel, there seems to be a misunderstanding from side of Gov as to how the feminist movement will be able to put a face on who this perpetrator necessarily is. That they are an actual person you may have thought was innocent, and your favorite actor on House of Cards was actually a child molester who is just like any other possible perpetrator that can be just like anyone else in this room at this particular moment. There is also just another morally reprehensible person who is a human that we can pinpoint than just a vague idea of accountability that can be taken by Hollywood as a whole. Imagine the power of the headline that says Kevin Spacey, your idol, is actually a child molester to be taken seriously by Hollywood and everyone out there, than to just say just another rape case in Hollywood. Maybe we can sweep it under the carpet and assume other people will be able to defend it at the end of the day. Closing opposition will be different from opening opposition in showing you that even at best, we don't think this debate is about ensuring more people get on the bandwagon, but it's about the positive way in which we can shame people and pinpoint accountability to them. Things such as, number one, is more likely going to be controversial and about a person, and that's how we're going to treat it. Or things such as how people will feel more agency and power when you get to disarm a person with their star status and understand that Hollywood will not be able to defend you at the point in which you say you are a perpetrator of a crime, or victims who will feel more confident of coming out when they know that a perpetrator will be prosecuted instantly at the point in which more people come out, and you know the feminist movement will be backing you at the end of the day. Other issues will be integrated as part of rebuttals in large. First, responsive extension that comes from closing opposition. Firstly, why we think that the government is ineffective on a comparative scale. No, thank you. Here's what we have to understand what the accountability trade-off necessarily is. That if you critique Hollywood, and by the way, this is what Gov has as a model, that if you critique Hollywood, you're going to put tabloids and generally Hollywood as a huge hegemon to be able to defend the issue that they're at hand about. And things such as acts around them. Things such as Leonardo DiCaprio or Ben Affleck being able to defend Kevin Spacey, for example, because you have other friends who can vaguely just get on it and try to defend what statement anyone else in Hollywood could have done. Or things such as tabloids believing that they can spin a story in order to ensure that Hollywood maintains relevant and the people you're going to put within your magazines will maintain people that will buy your magazines. Or things like hardcore fans or your everyday person was unable to relate to it because Hollywood is going to be seen as isolated if you only report it generally, which is a question that was never answered in the POI that I gave to Shah. Because if you're not going to show me that you can disarm Hollywood by not making it just like any social justice issue out there, then it's problematic, because other people idolize Hollywood to a point in which they are afraid to confront the ability to ensure that the person who is a criminal could just be like any one of us in this particular moment. But what do we get in comparative under CO? We'll disprove it to you one by one why Gov doesn't get this on a comparative scale. Myth said firstly that the facts will get bogged down, but in assessing the causes in which when you have cases that are one by one, you don't just say it is normal, that it is a case in which you say you have to investigate with the same amount of rigor concern and the seriousness as we do in law for anyone else in this room. For example, when Kevin Spacey, thank you, was put in the spotlight, we went to the details and the intricacy of how he was at that party, how much alcohol he consumed, and whether he was actually drunk at the point in which he molested Anthony Rapp when that person was only 14, and he can't use being drunk as an excuse just because he was a star, much like anyone else in this particular moment, which happens to our normal lives, and we can say it's deplorable if someone does it over here. So the point is that we don't just come up with the facts, we humanize the facts and say anyone else can also do it, and it's also something that's worth criticizing over. But the second thing they told us was people will get defensive and be able to defend it. It's weird, because if you're going to be personally shamed, then they have to defend themselves first, Maeve, at the point in which the circumstances around us as adults should be taken accountability of. That's why it's important for us to make sure that we pinpoint the blame to a particular person so that your other friends can just come in and tabloids will be able to help you at that particular moment. But the weird version of defensiveness under their side of the house was your ally can possibly defend for you. But that's problematic because Hollywood as well as allies can use their star status to defend a person in order to ensure that the people do not relate to it and cause it to be a more isolated case as a comparative under your side of the house. But if the person is also defensive, bro, that's good because you need to issue a statement, for example, that comes up with more facts and show a bit more of your character than just to come out and deflect responsibility. Kevin Spacey who said, oh, by the way, I was kind of gay at the point in which I kind of did it, but that's problematic because you need to make sure that you make it an isolated case that anyone else can possibly use an excuse later on. That's why it's important for us to not make sure that they get away with all this defensiveness and co-opting literally every single thing that OO actually correctly pointed out as a comparative scale that you have that uses and utilizes Hollywood as a person who can defend themselves with a hegemon. Yes, sir.
So, if all the most powerful people in Hollywood are mainly men and the perpetrators you're talking about, and the feminist movement has less social capital than the perpetrator, why would all your allies and other celebrities jump on the bandwagon rather than defend the perpetrator to protect themselves?
Because if you only cause Hollywood to defend themselves and women can't penetrate the point in which it is such a huge hegemon, taking it and dismantling it one by one as a person is an even better method of ensuring that you get the cause that you deserve. That's why Anthony Rapp as well as Bill Cosby was screwed over, because you could pinpoint who exactly this person was and not let him use his star status to defend himself. Second extension, why the focus on individual shaming changes the psyche of how people treat it and why it's morally reprehensible. Notice that on first we put a face to the misogyny as well as pedophilia that a person might have. The problem of antagonizing generally under your side of the house is, number one, people don't know who's necessarily responsible, but secondly, people who are responsible don't really know whether or not they're responsible because it's targeted generally and so vague at the end of the day. Things such as Harvey Weinstein, who had a stipulation in his contract that said he will pay X amount of dollars if he committed a sexual conduct. But the same individual who will be targeted in this particular instance is one that we understand we can disarm your star status to make it feel that it's a closer form of justice that's proximate to the person who is about to report. So in response to us, women will be scared to come out. I don't know, bro. Number one, even a woman feels that her justice is more proximate and the tabloids will be able to ensure shame the exact person that committed a crime against, and it's far more likely that the person will actually come out because they know that they will justice they deserve. Someone just say, I will find a way in which they can feel. And the moment the family is being assured, the moment we can ensure and we can get justice for you. That's why you should come out. Even on the imperative side, you have a lot more because they are way more confident from the justice they're about to get in the way in which you know and we will be able to ensure that Kevin Spacey gets screwed over. Here's the key imperative on the outside of the house. You just say we will forget about it because it is just another case that Kevin Spacey was a person who was a child molester. No, we're going to change the way in which we dismantle Hollywood. We're going to change the way in which people are able to reflect responsibility. We're going to humanize deplorable crimes and say and make it known that anyone out there who is going to be a person who will get molested is a person who should make sure that the person who committed that crime should be shamed, and we're here for you.
Alright, I thank the member of opposition who welcome the government whip to end the debate on government power. Yes, is that.
Look,
I honestly think the opposition bench has no idea of how public perception of guilt or innocence works, right? In some cases, the Harvey Weinsteins and the Kevin Spaceys of the world would have overwhelming evidence, both in terms of lawsuits, mainstream media coverage, prosecutions facing them. There is strong evidence that, you know, they are actually guilty of the things that people accuse them of. In which case, the marginal benefit of confining feminist criticisms to these individuals is really, really small, right? And in fact causes active harm. In the cases where there isn't strong evidence, that there might be an allegation or two, but as yet this guy has a really strong reputation in the Hollywood circuit, that the allegations are thus far unproven, that only 1 or 2 women have come up, like, there is a really good chance that those allegations will fail to stick against the guy, even if he is guilty. And as a result, the feminist movement risks destroying its own reputation at the point in time in which we are seen to wrongfully criticize random men, you know, for committing crimes that they supposedly did not commit. So I think OG has adequately dealt with the worst case scenario that neither opposition team has managed to comprehend thus far in this debate. That in many cases where there's no strong evidence, you're screwed. Right? So let's deal with the best case scenario, and that's what CG is going to do. What happens if there is strong evidence that these individuals were in fact guilty? Your Harvey Weinsteins, Kevin Spaceys, Chris Browns of the world, right? Given the fact that, as I said, you know, all of these other prosecutions, lawsuits, and so on are still going to exist anyway under your side, right? Regardless of what feminist activists or feminist celebrity allies or writers or feminist magazines do, we don't think there is any marginal benefit on their side. The individuals are screwed. They're going to be crucified anyway, right? There's absolutely no benefit of, just simply limiting your criticism to these particular individuals. So I don't see what the marginal benefit on their side is. The primary contribution, however, coming out of CO is the idea that other women are somehow going to be able to speak out or find the courage to speak out now that you managed to make an example out of Harvey Weinstein or Kevin Spacey or the like. I'm no, because the sort of people who will come out are additional victims of the same person. Because remember, in the eyes of the public, guilt and innocence is an individual thing. So if a person is proven on balance guilty in the court of public opinion, then after the first 20 victims speak out, the next 30 are going to speak out as well because they know, well, this guy is screwed, right? So obviously people are more likely to believe my story. But if I accuse I don't know, Leonardo DiCaprio of sexual assault, wherein there have been no allegations of sexual assault so far, then it doesn't matter whether Harvey Weinstein is screwed, because the guilt of Harvey Weinstein and the guilt of Leonardo DiCaprio is separate in the eyes of public opinion, and therefore they are not likely to come out at all. Or if they do come out, they are going to be quickly crucified by the rest of the media, by fellow actors, by whomever, and as a result they'll have their reputations ruined, death threats sent to their house. I really don't see how Mukesh' extension or Mukesh and Fred's extension actually works. So, furthermore, I think the problem is that it plays very much into the assumptions of many men in society, right? The idea that some men are sexual predators, but not all men are sexual predators. And the problem as a result is that, it is very likely that they will apply this same criticism to any allegations of sexual assault against other men who have thus far not been accused of sexual assault. And as a result, the point about how, more women are going to come out just because one other guy got screwed doesn't make sense, because it plays into the very rhetoric and logic of the people who say not all men are guilty of sexual assault. On the comparative, what we do is that we have moral support by critiquing an entire industry. In practice, that doesn't mean just saying, oh yeah, Hollywood is fucked up, right? It means subjecting almost every A-list male actor or A-list male director to scrutiny, right? Added scrutiny, and to see whether there have been allegations made against them in the past, or whether there have been lawsuits raised against them in the past, and therefore publicizing these things. Only when we have an industry-wide phenomenon do we ensure that there is added scrutiny on other people and their abettors, and people willfully ignore them, and in so doing provide moral support for these women, to make allegations against these individuals, because yes, the feminist movement is standing behind you, because we realize that the problem may exist elsewhere as well. No, thank you. So that's it with the CO case, right? But what active harms do you actually cause? And that is where Justin's extension comes in. There are 2 simple prongs to his extension that were ignored. First, that if you focus the attention of feminist activists, celebrity allies, magazine writers, and so on individuals, the average person's psychology, predicts that they will just find scapegoats to blame and then move on, right? In other words, they do not exactly, if these people were fellow actors or workers in Hollywood, they are very unlikely to examine their own culpability because it is human nature to find scapegoats and move on. Secondly, if they're not part of Hollywood themselves, they're just members of the ordinary public, they will not get it into their heads that many other cases of a similar nature exist because these power dynamics are, like in the Harvey Weinstein case and so on, are replicated in many instances across Hollywood. People just don't see the link. This is why a feminist critique that focuses exclusively or primarily on these individuals will play into people's own psychological biases and blind spots, which means you're not actually going to get the outcomes that you desire. Hold on. Secondly, what Justin already told you that also went ignored is the idea that you reinforce one of the most common critiques of feminism, and I talked about this earlier in the speech, not all men. Now, this is not just some sort of catchphrase that I'm going to drop, because clearly, like, given the fact that people's psychology indicates that guilt or innocence is an individual thing, given the fact that many men have often tried to find excuses to prevent the feminist movement from ascribing blame of some sort, like collusion, abetment, ignorance, like on them, that is where this catchphrase "not all men" came about. At the point in time in which you're only reinforcing these perceptions, it becomes much harder to enlist male allies in order to push forward more allegations against perpetrators. I will take opening.
Look, even when there are no evidence because it happened 15 years ago, the media attention and demonization of these perpetrators is enough for you to attract fancitas and drive it to the discourse that you guys want to have. How do you get that specific media?
Yeah, so I actually deal with that part already. In my first minute of my speech, right, I said, if you don't have strong evidence, we're screwed. If you do have strong evidence, I don't see what the marginal benefit on your side is. So, great. Now let's move on to the comparative. Is opening opposition's critique of our policy legitimate? That somehow Hollywood will become more defensive if we expand our criticism to include more of Hollywood, as opposed to as opposed to focusing on individuals. So firstly, I think that's not the case because of what Justin has already said, right? The idea that actors and actresses and directors are very sensitive to public opinion because it affects their personal marketing brand, affects the sponsorship deals they have. So obviously, even if personally they felt defensive, publicly they will be compelled to make noises of approval or solidarity with the feminist movement and make sure that they don't sound defensive. But even in the worst case scenario in which they are defensive, fine, right? I don't think any feminist movement, any member of the feminist movement is going to say that we will avoid all criticism of the feminist movement. I think it's going to be as vicious and as volatile as it was before. The question is whether in the long term we can actually push forward the priorities that we seek to push forward. And at the point in time in which we finally criticize people who have been abetting these perpetrators for so long, and the general culture of ignorance or turning a blind eye towards these things, I think we are in a much better position to ensure that females in Hollywood are adequately protected. Vote closing, Gov.
Right. Thank the government whip and welcome the opposition with to end the debate as a whole. Here.
In an industry that relies on perception, symbols matter in this particular circumstance. The ability for you to be able to pinpoint individual perpetrators and the mistakes that they have made in the past, but even if in the future you will be rallying upon finding out the instances of evidence to implicate another person, we think that targeted activism in this particular debate is extremely important. What did closing opposition argue that was conveniently dismissed by the closing government? They told us that our case was contingent upon us proving that more people are going to come out, no matter what the circumstance is, no matter who that person is, no matter how long the lapse of the events that has happened, and whether or not we can exactly prove that these things have occurred before. What is the response to that? That more likely people are going to come out as a result of being proximate to that justice, recognizing that people are more likely going to feel the psychological satisfaction of being able to bring that person to justice. That is the incentive for them to come out as a result. But B, they needed to argue, why is it exactly that the power asymmetry that exists within Hollywood is able to shut these people out without any point of neutralization, without any human face whatsoever? What did we do in closing opposition? At least that we rally upon a person that has committed a crime, and we are able to focus all our attention into proving that it's likely that the case was that he molested or sexually assaulted a person. That we are able to rely upon the support of the victims that is psychologically satisfactory in terms of willing to come out, but also rallying upon allies that are willing to take positions, recognizing that there is their own friend that was sexually assaulted, that they feel the brunt of being in a power asymmetry, whereby they are not benefiting directly in that industry. We think that these are incentive structures that are extremely good, and it's better off in a way in which that we are able to use targeted activism, recognizing that we are able to rally people on, that we are able to rally allies because they feel that they are going to be affected proximately and they feel that they're involved in the process of changing things. So we think the power asymmetry will be easily broken down to a point in which we have more critical mass to be able to defeat the power asymmetry that will not change if the feminist movement were to take multiple issues at hand at the end of the day. No, thank you. So what's the first question that CEO is going to prove? First, why is it important for the targeted activism to exist directly clashing with the government bench? But secondly, why is it important for victims to feel proximate justice, something that will never happen in the government bench? So the first question. So what is exactly the contention from the opening government that was sufficiently dealt with by Mukris? So they said that people would feel defensive as a result of this thing being individually targeted, that oftentimes individuals of very powerful stature are able to use their social capital, that people are likely going to engage in very destructive discourse about what exactly is the claims of these victims. So what did CEO say that was very important? That your star status is contingent upon the perception that you have within society, right? If targeted activism were to shame you, we think that the influence that you have will be diminished a lot, best case, but even if there was a slight dent, we think it's good. That why? People are more likely going to interact with your influence and say that we are like more people are going to come out as a result of that person having less influence to be able to shape the reputation and the discourse surrounding that person. Or B, the fact that the feminist movement is actually engaging by shaming that person means that it's leverage and legitimacy to all the other victims' claims when it comes to actually wanting to come out. We say that the loss of influence that will likely happen in targeted activism would likely mean that the power asymmetry that happens in the side of government would likely be diminished in this circumstance. But what did closing government say? That the ability for the industry to protect their friends and other people who are engaging in this behavior is likely going to be amplified in a world whereby they have plausible deniability as a result of this targeted activism. So what's the response from CEO that's extremely important? That we told you that it is very unlikely in a world whereby they will support their friends as the targeted activism were to happen, because the fact that we are actively shaming their friends or any resemblance of silence or active support will likely mean that you will be complicit of that event or you're implicitly supporting that event. We think it's extremely unlikely for you to be able to want to support your friend, recognizing that you could face the wrath of shaming by the industry, other media companies who are aligned with the feminist movement, or the feminist consumers themselves, or B, the fact that you are unlikely to be able to break the symmetry of power that exists, recognizing that it's at least attention being given to what exactly is the scale of the events and the scale of how misogynistic the industry is. If the feminist movement was able to point out these are the X amount of men who supported this perpetrator, as a result, we're able to use this point of reference to give legitimacy to our cause of saying that the industry is sexist, that the industry needed to be changed. It all started with one person being flagged out in this circumstance. I will take opening.
So all this is contingent upon the feminist movement having the ability to do two things. Either A, prove factually and evidentially the claim that they're making, but second, having more social capital than the perpetrator that you're talking about. Neither exists for your side. How will they convince society?
But also, we told you that, like, for example, if you are actively shamed, you have no ability to maneuver around, recognizing that your influence will diminish as a result of being shamed. But two, it's unfair for you to assume that in your world you will be able to prove the structural benefits and the consequences, recognizing that you don't place the burden on closing opposition as well. Like, we can prove to you that there will be massive ability for us to prove the cases, recognizing that we are allocating our resources to making sure that our factual claims are true. If not, the feminist movement will face legal claims as a result, and we think that's an incentive structure enough for them to be truthful of their claims. We think significantly sufficient for them to do that, and we think it's better off in that sense. But secondly, why is proximate justice sufficient? Because in their world of government, that that more often than not, feminist movements will have to prioritize what issues to take, especially considering the fact that there are multiple instances whereby the industry is at fault. Be it the wage gap, be it how they treat women, be it how they employ women in this circumstance. We think that often not justice is unable to be served, recognizing that they will likely prioritize women. Prioritize issues that are likely going to impact women the most, be the wage gap. At least in our world, we told you that it is very likely for the satisfaction of justice to come, recognizing there is legitimacy and there's support from the feminist movement to actively shame. We think it's extremely good for the victim. Nothing will happen for the victim in that world. So go with the side of closing opposition.
Alright, I think we go to the debate. Please leave the room.
Thank you.